Why'd you two come here? To ask you about Mr. Colbert.
Let me understand this. You two came here to question me?
Well, your attitudes, Mr. Endicott, your points of view are a matter of record. Some people, well, let us say the people who work for Mr. Colbert might reasonably regard you as the person least likely to mourn his passing. We were just trying to clarify some of the evidence. Was Mr. Colbert ever in this greenhouse, say last night, about midnight?
Gillespie? Yeah. You saw it.
I saw it.
What are you gonna do about it?
I don't know.
I'll remember that. There was a time when I could have had you shot.
A modern day remake of Matthew Vaughn's Layer Kick. A Coen brothers end up with Timothy Chalamet. A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel. Alvin and the Chipmunks deserve another squeakquel. There's so many new ways to revisit sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update. But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
Greetings, starfighters, river rowers, and delta dwellers. This is Ruined Childhoods. We're celebrating one Coulter classic film for each U.S. state, and this week we're in the Magnolia State, nicknamed for the state's official flower, the magnolia. This state is also called the Hospitality State, which is ironic due to its history of being the second state to secede from the Union in 1862. Certain notable folks who personally seceded from the state are Oprah Winfrey, Elvis Presley, and Lance Bass. What has four eyes but can't see? That's right, we're in Mississippi and we're talking about the 1967 Academy Award-winning film In the Heat of the Night. But first, Dan, have you spent much time in Mississippi?
You know, John, once upon a time I did spend a lot of time down in Mississippi.
Tell me about it.
So I and those who are devoted starfighters are maybe already familiar with my tales of the South. They came up as recently as Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And my tales of being an actor in a company, a touring company, at which, by the way, John, just yesterday, I was actually looking up in preparation for our episode. I was looking up, wish I had saved it, but like our itinerary, all of our stops on the tour, because we'd spent a lot of time in Mississippi. I was
quick question. What was the group called?
So on Yelp, as I discovered, it's Project Educational Theater. Okay. And what was really interesting was because I was like, how do I find this theater company? How do I find some archives? And I found the best I could find was its page on Yelp, and there were maybe 4 reviews there from people who all worked for the company. I believe they all worked for the company after I did, and they all had an almost identical experience to mine.
Interesting.
And absolutely. Absolutely. Difficult, challenging, definitely the type of work that is only sought after by non-union actors getting started who just are like, oh, you're going to pay me to do like an hour-long show 3 times a day and travel all over the place? Hell yeah, sign me up. That was definitely my feeling about it. And the reality of it was you were sometimes a lot of your shows, and this is, here's where I don't, if my tone is at all condescending, or if I sound like a quote unquote coastal elite, I do not intend that. I am telling you my perspective. And this was, by the way, in 2001. So the review that I left was basically on Yelp to say, hey, what everybody else said, plus this is what happened on 9/11. And it was this story specific to how our producer, who the other reviews established, like, did not care about the actors or their well-being, and how he treated us on September 11th, 2001. So I direct you to
yikes.
to the Project Educational Theater Yelp page, and the most recent review, I assume, is mine. And check it out if you want to read more. But one of the things that I will cite as like, it was like, you're carrying around all this heavy equipment and there's only a few people, like, look, I don't need, read the reviews on Yelp, and that will tell you everything you need to know about the experience. But what I want to spotlight is the opportunities that it gave. And this was why I gave a 2-star as opposed to a 1-star review. The opportunities to see parts of the country that I never would have seen before, including towns like, and possibly actually Sparta, Mississippi. I might have been in that town. I was certainly when I looked at the map and I was like, okay, where do I really remember being? I remember being in Natchez, which is down along the Mississippi River, down south of the state. I was definitely in Magnolia and Tupelo, as I have photos from the birthplace of Elvis Presley. Almost positive I was in Jackson and Meridian. So, and a lot more. We had a lot of shows in Mississippi. The tour was based in nearby Kenner, Louisiana, so it wasn't that far for us, from home base to go throughout Mississippi. So we were a lot of shows in Mississippi, and a lot of towns that were like Sparta, and definitely looking at Sparta. I know that they did not film it in Mississippi.
Sparta, Illinois, I think.
Yes. I don't know if you're planning on getting to that anecdote of that reason why they...
I'm sure we'll talk about it.
Okay. So anyway, they filmed in Sparta, Illinois, but I felt that there was a lot of that small town Mississippi that was captured in it. And also, to an extent, the TV series adaptation, which ran from 1988 to, I want to say 1994 or 5.
It says 95, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think I want to say there was a TV movie that I want to say was kind of, I don't know if that was like its big finale or it happened somewhat towards the end, and guest starred the late great Carl Weathers.
Oh, no way.
So
starred
anyway,
Carl Weathers.
I like guest starred. It did not star him. Right. He was not, they did not call him Mr. Tibbs, but that was still Howard Rollins who played, and it's the same character. And we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. We'll talk about that after we talk about the movie. Yeah. Yes. So anyway, Mississippi, but definitely I definitely drove past a lot of cotton fields, saw what cotton fields actually look like. And drove miles and miles of them, and just like flat land and like nothing. And of course, this was in 2001, late 2001, early 2002. So I'm sure a lot has changed. But then again, a lot hadn't really changed from 1967 to 2001. So you definitely saw your share of stars and bars. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. So
have you been? Have you been?
I've never been to Mississippi. I've touched foot down in Florida and then also in Texas, but in Georgia, of course, but like the states in between, not so much.
Not so much like that deep south.
No, I'd love to go through sometime. I don't see it happening, but you never know.
It would definitely be an interesting route for a road trip if you were specific about what you wanted to see and if you had certain interests. I mean, I took a bus through Mississippi. I'm pretty sure I've talked about my bus voyage before from that I took starting in Macon, Georgia, and then landing me in Delray Beach, Florida for a few days, and then bringing me up to Shreveport, Louisiana. So definitely passed through Mississippi, and yeah, man, I was all up and down that state.
Yeah. Well, cool. I mean, despite the subject matter that focuses us in Mississippi, especially on this episode, I hear that there are some really beautiful areas, and I'm sure it would be really lovely to kind of check those out at some point in my life.
The land ain't racist. Just
yeah. No.
Yep.
No. I mean, it was the land predates the racists that were there.
The land don't care.
Yeah.
Sorry, it might be a hot take, but yeah.
Yeah. So Dan, this is my first time seeing In the Heat of the Night. Had you seen it before?
Yes, once before. Not too long ago. Also through a streaming service. Just one of those, like, hey, this is a movie that's kind of always been on my list.
You know, it's not one that I necessarily ever really thought too much about, but of course I knew the line, "They call me Mr. Tibbs." And so because there is a sequel that is called "They Call Me Mr. Tibbs," I think that my association was like, oh, it's part of that. And the organization, which is the third in this trilogy, I had, seen that it exists, but I never put the pieces together that those three movies were connected. And I'm sure that I would have seen In the Heat of the Night at some certain point because of all of the Academy Awards it won. I'm sure that my interest would have brought me there eventually, but it certainly wasn't one that was like, foisted upon me the way that a lot of other movies are. And
Best Picture 1967, right?
Yeah, well, the 68 Best Picture,
yeah. So, and I mean, talking about films that were, I don't want to say foisted upon us, but films that were definitely more part of our as brothers, our upbringing. From that era, you had The Graduate and The Producers. And things like that. Right. But this was not one.
Which is unfortunate because I feel like seeing a movie like this is important because this is a very great representation of the reality that somebody like Virgil Tibbs would have had in, 1960s Mississippi. And these are actors performing and everything, but I want to say that, I mean, that's the reason why they didn't film this in Mississippi.
Well, right.
It would not have been safe.
Well, no, Sidney Poitier experienced that firsthand.
Right. Yeah.
With on a trip south with Harry Belafonte, where they encountered the Klan.
Yeah. And so it would not have been safe for them to film in Mississippi. Nope. So they very brilliantly filmed in Sparta, Illinois. They wouldn't have to change any signage on any of the businesses in town that had Sparta on it. A very smart move, especially since the look of the town, matched the look that they wanted to go for.
Oh, had I not looked, I would have thought it was definitely filmed on location, if not in Sparta, Mississippi, but definitely in Mississippi or Louisiana or Alabama.
Yeah. But I feel like the reason that they had for not filming on location in Mississippi adds to the, it's almost like it's better than filming in Mississippi for authenticity because the story kind of lives along with it. And it is a story that, lives alongside the themes of the movie.
Right.
And I think that's a really important, it's not, I mean, I don't even want to say footnote. It's it's a little info bit that needs to kind of just be tacked onto it at all times.
It's important context. It's really important context to have. And there's some other context that I feel like context comes into play whenever you're watching a film like this, a film about civil rights, about racism, really more about racism than civil rights.
Yeah.
This is not To Kill a Mockingbird, which is more about the legal. This is also about the law, but it's more about people's attitudes. That is about both. But we do need to have context when we look at stories like this, more so To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah.
But when it comes across and we look back and we're like, well, this was a movie made by white people, even though Sidney Poitier had a lot of pull and a lot of say in the adaptation. Mm-hmm. It's a movie not made by a Southerner. It's made by Norman Jewison. Yeah. And it doesn't have that quote unquote white savior, which I know has Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird has gotten that reputation. Yeah. And I would not consider our Rod Steiger's Chief Gillespie here to be a quote unquote white savior character. He's an interesting character, actually.
Yeah.
And Steiger played,
and I want to
go ahead.
Yeah, I want to talk about that more. I just have a quick little synopsis for anybody who perhaps is unfamiliar with In the Heat of the Night, or if maybe you need a little refresher.
Yeah.
After a prominent businessman is found dead in a small Mississippi town, suspicion is instantly directed at a black man waiting for a train to travel back to Philadelphia. But Sheriff Gillespie ends up eating crow when it's revealed that this man is Philadelphia homicide detective Virgil Tibbs. Gillespie instead requests that Tibbs help him solve the murder case. Over the following days, Virgil Tibbs navigates a homicide investigation while dodging racially motivated attempts on his life, all while navigating challenges brought on by Gillespie's complicated racial tendencies. Actually, I wrote racist tendencies. I said racial, but no. He is somebody that is racist. It's the whole reason why, Virgil is assumed to be the killer right away. It's like, oh, we've got our man. And then it's just like, oh, you are not the man. And then as the movie goes on, it's like he's having these conflicting feelings where it's just like, I have to respect this person on a professional level. And I am seeing, maybe for the first time, the reality of the difficulties that a black man in Sparta, Mississippi would have. Especially an outsider, because we do see some black people that are in Sparta. They are definitely treated as not even second-class citizens. Right. And he's kind of having these moments where the influence of the townspeople around him kind of sometimes bring him back to being really rude to Virgil. And then in the moments where he recognizes Virgil's importance and validity as a human, maybe, that we see him kind of step up, but then it's kind of like he takes one step forward and then two steps back consistently throughout the movie.
Right. And I get the idea that I feel like a lot of it comes from him being like a younger Gillespie would be much more racist. It's kind of like he's too tired and he's just like, you know what, it's too hot. My air conditioner doesn't work. I'm sweaty. Everything is sweaty. I don't have the energy to put up with. I don't have the energy to for hate anymore. And it's like, fine, you are going to solve this murder for me. Great. Whatever. He doesn't drop the things like calling him black boy. Right. Pretty much right up to the end, but
just boy in general. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well that's a big one. That's a big one here, but he's also what's cool about Gillespie is that he's also someone who's kind of like he doesn't like to answer to anybody, but
true.
Yet he still kind of gets the feeling that like these wealthy, privileged people, like in the movie, it's Endicott, who, who feel like they own everything and like they're above the law. He doesn't like nobody's above the law according to him.
And for those who either haven't seen the movie recently or maybe don't know it, Endicott is the owner of a cotton plantation, and I would say employs black folks to do the work, but I wouldn't say that they are perhaps treated as fairly as one would perhaps hope. It's almost like the Civil War never ended in Sparta.
I would say, yeah, all that's changed is they get paychecks and go home off of Endicott property. Yeah. That's probably all that's changed there.
Right. And also the Endicott plantation was filmed. That was the one part that was filmed in Mississippi. And allegedly the conditions were very uncomfortable, shall we say, for the crew.
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret really that a lot of the Southern there's a lot of that quote unquote Southern pride and a lot of stubbornness in kind of like letting go of that quote unquote heritage.
Yeah, I mean, the war of Northern aggression didn't turn out the way they were hoping, and so now they're just putting up with the results.
Yep. So, and that's a multi-generational reckoning there.
Yeah.
But of course, this, I'm sure, was the first time on Endicott property that a black hand ever slapped a white face.
First time it happened on film.
Yeah. So anyway, so now we know what we're dealing with here. And, okay. So we kind of have this, like, this relationship, this also like a little buddy cop relationship going on, little early days of buddy cop dynamic here with, and it feels like a movie like this, even though you can, in hindsight, look at it and you're like, oh, well, this is not progressive. It absolutely was in 1967. And
absolutely, yeah.
It's kind of like when you looking at the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and like, yes, that would be very problematic if somebody wrote that book and tried to publish it today, especially if that person was white. But at the time that To Kill a Mockingbird was published, who else was going to get that story published, and how else was that story going to get published without a quote unquote white, I'm doing that a lot on this episode, sorry, quote, without that white savior character and this is kind of like, it's not necessarily right. It's not like one novel or one film or even a decade's worth of them are going to smash down the walls of bigotry and build that bridge. You have to chip away at that wall. And this was how you chip at that wall. You had to have stories that were going to be that your general public and white people were going to pay attention to, so that they would just see it. And also, like, how impressive that it was in a world the publishing world run by white men, a white woman gets the story published, To Kill a Mockingbird, that is, and then you at least get that message out there and people pay attention to it because, oh, it's Gregory Peck. So so they pay attention to it, and they start that you could start to develop that empathy.
Just a real quick note on Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird, because I watched it recently when we were doing our Anatomy of a Murder episode. I was just watching a lot of that time courtroom movies, and man, he sounds so much like RoboCop. He does. He sounds like this.
Yeah. He does. Yeah. Wow. Well, all right.
That's just an observation.
Like, so I can watch that movie again. It's just never going to be the same.
And it shouldn't be. So something that I really appreciate, what I really appreciate about In the Heat of the Night is that I feel like a lot of movies at that time would be taking two police officers of different races, and what a lot of them would do is, even if the white one starts off saying racist things, by the end they would be, buddy and hugging, arms around each other, that kind of a thing or whatever. And what this movie does is, because you have Gillespie kind of constantly going back and forth in the way that he's treating Tibbs, it is a I don't know about realistic, because who's to say what exactly would be realistic, but I felt like it was a more honest representation of somebody who's in a transitional, being swayed by the heritage and the feelings of the other residents of the town, and then the reality of his intellect kind of coming in and being like, no, this guy is obviously really freaking smart and is the only hope I have of solving this case, because if it was only up to him, I mean, forgetting about him arresting Tibbs, but he would have thought that he had the guy at the beginning, the one guy who
he's got two
who just took the wallet.
Yeah, no. Gillespie arrests three guys that are clearly innocent. Yeah.
And what I also really love about this movie, just real quick, Dan, is talking about Endicott. When Virgil Tibbs acknowledges that he was kind of blinded by his desire to put the blame on Endicott for the murder. And then when he realizes no, this guy just sucks really bad and I hate him, but it doesn't mean that he's guilty of this murder. The way that he acknowledges that, I thought was really wonderful. And not every movie would do that. They would make the villain Endicott.
And that's the realism, though, is that there are people out there who their greatest crime is that they're pieces of shit.
Yeah,
they're terrible. They are terrible people, but that's not against the law.
Endicott's biggest crime is he is a piece of shit, and then, because of that, ...
Right. But the scene, I love how that scene plays out, though, in the little greenhouse, and how friendly it starts. I love how friendly it starts. That even if John, you hadn't seen it before. Did you just know it was the calm before the storm?
Not necessarily. I think that just because there was so much movie left at that point, I got the impression that this is happening, but it's not going to be just wrapped up this nicely. That, he goes into the car, he finds the thing from the cotton plant or whatever, and he goes to the cotton place, and then, it's too, connecting the dots. And this movie doesn't seem like it's a connect the dots kind of movie.
Oh, no, I just meant, did you know that, did you know that it was going to get intense between Endicott and Tibbs?
I did not. No.
No, okay.
Yeah.
You were just they're talking about flowers. They have common interests. It's nice. It's a meet cute.
Well, it was when they're talking about the orchids, and then they start talking about the one specific orchid, and Endicott says, that's so fitting that you're drawn to this one, because this one reminds me of the,
Yep.
the black man and all this kind of stuff. And
Yep.
I'm just like, I can't tell exactly why, but I really don't like this dude. And yes, you see the people who are picking the cotton and everything, but it's like, but there's got to be more. Oh, here we are. It's like he gives us those moments to realize, oh yeah, that's why I don't like you.
Right. And I think especially to a modern audience, maybe even I can't speak to what it was like to see it in 1967, but from a modern perspective, instantly when you go onto the Endicott plantation and you're like, oh yeah, no, this guy definitely like his like grandpappy owned slaves. And
Totally.
And he is not ashamed of it. And they've got the little thing in front. They've got the little jockey in front, the little blackface jockey up in front. So like, no, you're set up like as the audience, you want it to be Endicott, I think. Like you're like, oh yeah, no, because also of course, right. Like who else, who else has been, the enemy of this business coming in, this factory coming into town, new industry. So I like that it kind of suckers us all in and reminds us that, like, you know what? You can't charge someone with murder just because they're a jackass.
No, I think that the movie does a really good job at like keeping us questioning who's good and who isn't good. I mean, when the movie starts, we see the Warren Oates character, Officer Wood, and he's driving through town. Well, first we see him at that diner, and with Ralph, who's, I mean, Anthony James as Ralph is so good, like this wiry, sweaty creep,
so creepy.
Yeah, who clearly hates cops and is just like, oh, this Officer Wood is somebody I get to just mess with nonstop. And oh god, all the flies going around, it's disgusting.
I was just thinking about that. I was like, oh, this guy's gross. You're right. You don't like him from the start, but
you don't like him from the start, but you don't suspect that he's anything more than just the like gross dude who serves, pie and stuff. And so we see Warren Oates, and then he's kind of going through town, and then we see him stopping and looking through the window at Purdy. What was her first name? Dolores. And, we see her kind of wearing no clothes, taking a little swig of soda.
Boobies.
Yeah. Very, very craftily blocked by like, pieces of furniture and windows and stuff like that. So you see him and he's peeking in on this girl, and okay, this is a sleazy cop. And then of course he comes upon this dead body that he sees is Colbert, and it's, the movie can set on its course from there. And I thought that it was really brilliant because it already establishes the vibe of the cops in this town. And without really him even really doing anything. He doesn't even like say anything, but you just know, like, this is an unsavory character. And he's not even the least savory character. He's just kind of like mid-road unsavory.
Oh yeah, no, he's
like
just
baseline unsavory.
Gross.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And and then
Sorry, you know who it hit me? You know who I feel like Ralph is perhaps like the father or grandfather of Stanley Spadowski. And it's like
wow.
the same frame, the same, just like, imagine
gawkiness.
Right.
Now,
just
everybody who isn't familiar with UHF, this is Michael Richards' character in UHF.
Yeah. And everyone who isn't familiar with UHF, get with the program.
Yeah.
It's on U62. Check it out. All right. Back to In the Heat of the Night.
Yeah, I will say it's kind of like young Michael Richards mixed with like Anthony Perkins.
Oh, yeah, definitely got that Anthony Perkins
Yeah, he's got the creepiness.
quality.
Exactly. Yeah. So right, we see Sam Wood, we know unsavory, and then we meet the rest of the cops, and it's just like just a bunch of bumbling idiots. Gillespie is just like, okay, I've got the guy, we're good. And this is a question that I ask of a lot of, police driven shows or movies, where it always gives me the question of, are you trying to find somebody for this? Or are you trying to find the person who did this? Like, it seems in a lot of TV shows and movies, it's like, as soon as they find somebody who's a suspect that they like, and trust me, I watch a lot of Murder, She Wrote. We know this.
Yes.
So the cops are frequently just like, so many of the cops are frequently just like, but look, he matches all the criteria and da-da-da-da-da. And then, of course, like Jessica Fletcher is just like, yeah, but there's one thing that's just sticking to my craw. And it's like there's one thing that like doesn't really check out. And then, of course, she's right. But it's like, in a lot of these movies, there's these cops that are just like, this is the guy. Like, look at this. He stole the wallet. He's running from us. Certainly he's the guy. He confessed, whatever. It's like, isn't that going to be good enough? And then it's just like, right, but this doesn't add up. And it's like, he's left-handed. And this couldn't have been done by somebody who's left-handed.
Oh my God, that's so funny. That was exactly what I was thinking.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's
craw. That's exactly the type of thing that would stick in that Fletcher craw.
And that has happened on at least one episode of Murder, She Wrote, where somebody, their dominant hand isn't the dominant hand. On the most recent season of True Detective, The Night Country, there's a whole situation where somebody has been like, on record where they committed suicide, but they were left-handed and it doesn't check out with the gunshot and everything. So it's something that's still being used in pop culture today because probably it comes up a lot.
Yep.
So
never gets old. But these are definitely, I mean, look, these cops don't even want to fix the little like door. They don't want to work.
Yeah.
They want to drive around, eat pie, look at boobies, and that's about it.
Well, and I'm sure that there's not a lot of police work that goes on in that town. There's probably a lot that should go on in that town, but it's not a very active, at least from what they care about, crime town. I mean, when there's a murder of a prominent figure in the town, then yeah, of course they're going to have to, get to work.
Well, and of course he's an outsider, so.
And boy, oh boy. Trouble. When Sidney Poitier is the character of the outsider, you better look out. You better not say the wrong thing to that guy because you know that he's always going to be the virtuous one.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, no, I was referring, it's actually that Colbert is an outsider, someone who's,
yeah.
Right. A northern business. So it's kind of like that other sense of just like, outsiders, they just cause trouble for us here in Sparta, which is a very Spartan attitude to take, I would say.
Yeah. And we have Lee Grant as the victim's wife, who I thought was really fantastic. I mean, talk about prolific actors. She, she was going all the way up until 2005 acting.
I always think of her most with Defending Your Life.
Oh, she's so good at Defending Your Life.
Right. I think that's like, that's what I know her from. I know she's done clearly so much more. But
if somebody is in Defending Your Life, that is the movie that I know them from. And it is the movie that I use as kind of like the benchmark for, how great they are.
I would say with the exception of Meryl Streep, that is correct.
Even with Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep in that movie is so perfect.
Oh, it plays, don't get me wrong. It is not in the, pie chart of what composes Meryl Streep's greatness but also what we forgive her for. There, a large chunk of it belongs to Defending Your Life. But, also Kramer versus Kramer and
but what I mean is like, if you had to put into an AI generator, generate the most likable character, it's Meryl Streep in Defending Your Life.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yes. No.
And so, and Dan, also, you know, we're doing this series. We're going through each of the 50 United States plus Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. And I think we should add one more onto that, Judgment City.
But Judgment City, like, that's the thing. Judgment City knows no borders. Everyone is there. It's not I feel like Judgment City has got I think we need to do our own series there on the ethereal locations of, the
space between life and death.
Well, we do Judgment, right? Do Judgment City, do the Fountain. We could do, I don't know. I'm like,
maybe we don't do that.
What else? There's plenty of those type of movies, of course. But yeah, it's Judgment City.
So anyway, back to Mississippi though. I
Different
really
types
felt
of
like
judgment in this city.
Yeah. And I've talked about this before, and when I'm watching movies like this where it's like, oh, most of the cast or most of the characters are going to be extremely unlikable and are doing things that are so against what is right. I do have to, while I'm watching it, remember, like, these are actors who are playing these roles because this is a movie that is, you know, probably to these actors more than just a paycheck. You know, a lot of these characters who are played, you know, those kids in the car who are, like, you know, running them off the road and have the chain and all that kind of stuff, trying to beat them up. It's like those people in reality, in those actual brains, are thinking like, oh my God, I would never do this. Oh my God, this is so awful. And they have to access that part of themselves to be able to play the role, but like are most likely not those characters.
You have to hope and assume that, you know, before places are called and after cut is called, that they're having donuts and coffee with Sidney Poitier and
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, right. And laughing and
there are exceptions to the rule. I'm sure that, you know, there's been plenty of James Woods characters that you know, could easily fit into something like this, or John Voight or something like that. But
yeah, I was gonna say James Woods characters or just James Woods.
Woods, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the only movies I can watch him in are movies where he plays characters that are as despicable as he is.
Not even acting.
Fortunately, there's a few, and I don't watch Casino that often, so
yeah. But yeah, I don't know, Dan. So we mentioned briefly the sequel and the sequel's sequel. They Call Me Mr. Tibbs and the organization. So something that kind of tickled me about this movie is how the most famous line from this movie, and also from like most movies, is "They call me Mr. Tibbs." To call the sequel "They Call Me Mr. Tibbs" is like calling a sequel like "Luke, I Am Your Father," or I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse. Like, that's so bold to call your sequel the famous line from your movie.
Are there any other examples of that?
I can't think of any. I don't know. I mean, in Breakin', does somebody say "Electric Boogaloo"? Like, I don't know, but I mean, it's not even
then.
Called,
it's still Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo.
I know it's not called. This isn't called "In the Heat of the Night." They call me They call me Mr. Tibbs. Like,
You Can't Handle the Truth, the sequel to A Few Good Men.
I know, right?
Not even including the character that says that line. Why not?
I know, it's really fascinating, and I kind of love that about this, is that they were just like, screw it, let's just call it "They Call Me Mr. Tibbs" with an exclamation mark.
Oh, hell yeah. You know what so first of all, before we move on, I also want to just kind of point out something that I love about watching films from the late 60s and the 70s is how well they're shot, and
oh yeah,
watching them, seeing them in kind of high definition, and see the way that light is used, the way that the screen is used in this, the balance, the score. Quincy Jones, hello. Yeah.
I do love the shot when Virgil is in the jail cell and it has the shadow of like the bars on the window coming through.
Yep.
Beautiful shot. Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's a lovely, lovely looking movie. And it's one of those movies that, again, you look at the sequels, and again, I haven't seen them, but just judging by, I don't know, the fact that the sequel is the most famous line from the original with an exclamation mark.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I love those. There's those string of movies from this era that are like legitimate classics that will hold up, that stand the test of time, that just have like a run of just like cheap and lousy sequels. Because you have this, you have Jaws, you have oh damn it, there was another one I was thinking of where it's like the original is just a classic, and then the sequels just Rocky. Not that the sequels, I don't want to say that those sequels devolve. Those sequels are a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
I was just listening to an episode of the podcast Blank Check. They're talking about the movie Predator, and just about how the sequels to that are just until like Prey, it's just going further and further down.
Brief
but then,
comment.
No,
I want to say brief. What I feel is about the Predator sequels is that at the time Predator 2 came out, for some reason, people felt it was disappointing. When you look at it after all of the other Predator sequels, Predator 2 is fucking awesome and totally stands up. It is not quite the original Predator, but man, Predator 2, which I enjoyed at the time, but I was like 12. So it was set up for
12-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I've watched it again not too long ago and was still really, really into it. But yeah, so anyway, you have these like, the originals are classics, but then the sequels are just kind of watered down.
I believe that the sequels did pretty well. I don't know exactly what the reception was critically.
Not at the level of In the Heat of the Night.
Let's look up on Rotten Tomatoes.
I feel like
I'm just curious.
No. I'm glad you're looking. I'm glad you're looking that up.
Well, They Call Me Mr. Tibbs is a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the organization, which is a great name for a movie, and that's 25%. Yikes! Ugh. And I'm checking In the Heat of the Night just to see for context. Oh, geez, it's buried because of all of the other In the Heat of the Nights.
Wow. Oh, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. There's another one. Classic, and then the prequel is just
right. Yeah, In the Heat of the Night, 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's pretty dang good.
Yeah, right. You can't argue with that.
Yeah, but that's a big drop to go from 96 to 50 and then to 25.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, tell me, what does the series In the Heat of the Night have? Because if there is a true sequel to In the Heat of the Night, I would say it's the series In the Heat of the Night.
Let's see. In the Heat of the Night. What year did that debut?
1988.
Okay. In the Heat of the Night, 1988 TV show. Oh, here we go. TV shows. Okay, so that one. And Rotten Tomatoes doesn't really do TV the way that it does movies. So I don't know if it actually has like a tomato score.
Well, In the Heat of the Night,
score for this one. I think that this was just like before they were recording TV reviews.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it takes place at some point after the movie In the Heat of the Night, though from the dialogue it's implied that it's much sooner. However, there are some discrepancies. So first of all, you have Howard Rollins taking over the role of Virgil Tibbs, and you have Carol O'Connor taking over the role of Chief Gillespie. And Tibbs comes back to town for his mother's funeral. And we remember he was visiting his mother in the original. Although in the film, I don't remember it being specified that his mother lived in Sparta. Now in the series,
was under the impression that he was just passing through.
I was under that impression as well. The series, however, establishes that Tibbs's mother was in fact like the town's caterer, and she just catered every event and everybody knew.
So then why didn't he stay with her while he was there?
Because he was just passing through
in
the movie. So they reference, and by the way, also he's married. Which in the movie
they call her Mrs. Tibbs. Is that
right? That's what they do. Yes, she's played by Anne Marie Johnson. So Mrs. Tibbs, I think Althea is her name in it. So she's Northern, and he while he's in town receives first of all there's a murder, and he's Gillespie kind of brings him in on it, and he kind of, and then the mayor offers him a position as chief of detectives. There's no detectives in there, but like basically I think the mayor wants to run for Senate, and he needs he needs a civil rights record. So he wants to appoint a black detective, chief of detectives.
Got it. Okay.
So it's not shy about racial conflict in this. Like he gets called boy and all that. There's an innocent kid gets arrested for the crime, who of course is black, and he gets lynched while he's in the county, in the jail.
Yikes.
It goes pretty hard. So the series also in the pilot episode features murder committed by the son. Spoiler alert! It's committed by the son of, again, the Cotton big shot in the movie. His name is like Lafitte, and he's played by, speaking of UHF, the late great Kevin McCarthy.
Oh, nice.
Who is totally racist, and it turns out his son did it because his son has been running like an underground pornography operation, and he's been basically running Lafitte Studios in a secret room in his house, but also he was taking secret videos with his girlfriend and his friend and his friend's girlfriend. And it's funny because when the father finds out, and he's so angry, and Kevin McCarthy's ready to rip his son's head off, and he's like, our family name, do you know what you've done to our family name? And the son is like, I know what I would have done to our family name. I would have put it in stores nationwide if you hadn't stopped. Basically, I was going to be the greatest pornographer ever. It was such an interesting twist, but yeah. So anyway, Tibbs moves to Sparta and teams up with Gillespie, and it's a procedural, so it's every week there's something different. And the show originally, I believe, ran on NBC. and then ran on CBS.
And famously, Gillespie is played by Carol O'Connor, who makes complete sense. I mean, he looks like Rod Steiger, and also he is known to play a grumpy bigot.
Racist. Yeah,
grumpy bigot, cantankerous racist.
Yeah,
take your pick.
Just this time he's doing it in the Deep South instead of Queens.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, watching Rod Steiger, it was kind of like, it's hard to unsee Carol O'Connor in his face in some moments, where it's just like, man, when they were casting this show, were they just like, and obviously it'll be Carol O'Connor, right?
Well, I think Carol O'Connor was the one. I think he produced it. I think
right, but I mean,
Carol
it doesn't
O'Connor
necessarily mean that.
Well,
it doesn't mean that he was the one that initiated the, like. He didn't go to be like, I want to be Chief Gillespie in the Heat of the Night series.
I mean, yeah, who knows? But let's see. Yeah, it's a sequel. Oh, yeah, right. Oh, so it's on the Wikipedia page for the show. It says that the events of the movie are said to have occurred a few years ago. The series is definitely set in the late 80s when it was made. So yeah, there's a little discrepancy. There's a little discrepancy there. I suppose it leaves time for Tibbs to get married.
I'm picturing, by the way, Dan, I'm picturing you saying that it definitely takes place in 1988. I'm expecting it to be like them, pulling up in the cop car and they're playing like "Simply Irresistible" by Robert Palmer, and it's like, just like obvious markers of the time.
It definitely takes place in 1988.
You hear "Don't worry, be happy."
That is where I was going next. What's next? Georgia Satellites, Keep Your Hands to Yourself.
Hey Tib, don't worry, be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was looking to see because Murder, She Wrote was on CBS, right?
I believe so, yeah.
And when did it run?
It started in 84. So I'm sure that there was a desire for there to be, and I mean, there were so many of those at that time of varying different levels, of course, like Magnum PI and shows like that, where it's like, the crime of the week, essentially.
I mean, all you need to do is write in a Fletcher relative that lives in Sparta.
She has a lot of relatives on that show.
Like, her niece is having a baby and she's in town, and what do you know? There's a murder.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be impossible to imagine a scenario in which she does have like a black relative who's like a cousin of Virgil Tibbs or something like that.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I don't even think you need to stretch. Network series did not stretch that far. It was just like, okay, like, how are we going to get Urkel onto Full House? I don't know. Like,
I don't know. He just knocks on the door.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure
I think that he was like visiting a cousin or something.
Of course, he was visiting a cousin. Yeah. They're always that's what happens. You're visiting a cousin in another city, and they live next door to the Tanners. Yeah,
no, that's how it happens.
Of course. All right, so we've got a Best Picture winner, 2 apparently subpar sequels. A TV series. By the way, you've got all the novels that this was based on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. So, where to from here?
While I was watching it, I initially was thinking about a play, but as it went on, I started to think like, oh no, there's just too many different like locations and these kind of things that just wouldn't work out so well for that. And I was thinking about like the title of it, In the Heat of the Night, and I was kind of hoping that the entirety of the movie would like take place over the course of like one night. You know, like there's something about it where it was just like, oh, there's a body discovered at night, and they bring this guy in who's there all in the same, 1 hour time frame or whatever. And I was thinking like, oh, it'd be really cool to do a version of this where like, he is on the 10 a.m. train. It's a
Right.
before sunrise situation.
Right. Yeah. Or the paper.
And,
the paper.
The paper, yeah, but it's like we've got to, we only have this, really high profile homicide detective in town until his train takes him to Philadelphia. His, commanding officer or whatever has said that, we can use him if we want to during the time that he's there, but he's there for only a limited time. And so, yeah, I was thinking like a remake, but it is something where, and I don't think that it needs to be set in 1967 because there is still racism, unfortunately. And, as we all are aware, ACAB, all cops are bastards. And, there are certain pockets of this country where police brutality against, black people is, rampant. And, I feel like there should be something that takes place now that does involve a black homicide detective in a part of the world that is, less likely to be welcoming to him. And, and maybe for them also it is like we need to get through this as quickly as possible because we don't want him around. And, we don't want our citizens to see that we're working with him because they won't trust us. And so, yeah, I think a modern day remake that just takes place over the course of a night. It doesn't need to be Virgil Tibbs. I feel like that name, because of the famous quote, kind of exists with Sidney Poitier. And to recreate that with like Michael B. Jordan, it wouldn't feel authentic. And obviously, I'm saying Michael B. Jordan should play the role because he's fantastic. We have so many great, black actors who would be awesome. This, I talk about Donald Glover all the time. I feel like he would also be great. Lakeith Stanfield, maybe not Lakeith Stanfield for this one, but Daniel Kaluuya would of course be great. But I'm just thinking about like that age range where it's like you're not like super seasoned, but you're still very, you've been in it long enough where you can be a really good detective.
Right. So not even a I'm gonna hopefully not butcher the name, but a Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Too old.
Too old. Because I was gonna say Denzel, definitely too old. But
John David Washington would be great.
John David Washington would be great. Yeah, definitely would certainly call back to his Black Klansman.
No, but I think that Michael B. Jordan would be, where I would go with that.
Right.
And
Michael B. Jordan would be, he's a great actor. So I think he'd be great. And like you said, there are, I'm sure, a lot of great black actors out there that are not just directly at the top of our heads.
Yeah.
Who, I'll tell you who's not going to get cast in that, Jonathan Majors. But never again. So, okay. So a remake would you, and but not that I think that you need to, because as you said, like it is sadly still relevant, but any consideration to a remake that explores like another, I don't know, for a moment when you were talking about it and like being contemporary, and it was like, I wonder, like what about being like a trans cop today? Like, what's that like? I don't know any I have not read any stories of or by trans cops. And I mean, not that I guess the thing is, really, there would be no need for anybody to know, or really, like, you just introduce yourself as who you are, and you'd be like, "Hi, I'm Detective Go ahead.
I feel like for me, the only trans representation I've seen on television in the police is David Duchovny in Twin Peaks. And it's done magnificently there, and a very early nod of approval for the trans community by David Lynch, who kind of handles it flawlessly. However, I feel like for this specifically, I think that that racial tension is the smarter move. I feel like it just might be that we're not ready yet to really get into a trans man or woman or non-binary individual on the police force.
Well,
in
also,
this kind of context.
Right. And also I feel I as I was kind of talking through it, kind of realized why that doesn't work as well, at least in terms of somebody who's trans, who's maybe not going, like, they're not going to introduce themselves as, yes, hi, I'm the new trans detective. Yeah. And if they don't, there's a good chance you would be working with a trans cop and not necessarily know, because it would make absolutely no difference and not matter in the least, and not be necessary to know. Whereas, you can't hide, or not, that's right. You can't, racism it's on the surface.
I think that another big difference that we haven't mentioned yet is that there is a deep history in specifically police violence against Black individuals. The police, a historically white organization. And when it comes to trans people, it's more common for the aggression to be coming from regular everyday citizens. It's just that there isn't that history that's the same, that's on the same level.
And honestly, police violence against trans people is, I don't have the data in front of me, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say higher among people of color. So
100%. No, I mean, not 100%. That's an actual number, but yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. It's right. It makes a lot of sense. Sorry, you'd said something and I wish I had written it down because I wanted to.
Oh, did I say something really smart?
Totally.
Do you want me to say everything that I said over again?
Yeah, if you could go back and just do everything. Yeah, hold on. Let me get my pad this time.
So what I was saying, to repeat myself, is that there's a much deeper history of violence against Black individuals by the police, and that history
that was it. That was it.
To the beginning of the police. Yes, go on.
That was it. Yes, the origin of the police as being the slave patrol, the runaway slave patrol.
Exactly.
That being how, and that the original, originally the settlers didn't want police because that was right.
Yeah, isn't it crazy?
But anyway, that's where you were going.
That's where I was going. So tell me, what's your vision for perhaps a fourth in the Tibbs series? I don't know. What are you thinking?
I'm actually not thinking of a fictional exploration of this. I think dare I say, perhaps fictional, but as I was thinking fictional, I was saying, well, why fictional? Because there are so many true stories and maybe it's a bit overdone at this point, and there's probably one out there. And I know that there are several podcasts out there about law enforcement in the South. I would be interested to hear some more stories about law enforcement during the civil rights era in the South, hearing the stories of Black law enforcement officials and officers having to work with cops who they knew were racist having to go in and report to a chief who's got a Confederate flag, who's got multiple Confederate flags in their office.
Just doing a quick Google, I just quickly searched for the very first interracial police partnership, and it came up with nothing. And I thought that'd be a really interesting story to tell. The first time that a black police officer got partnered up with a white police officer.
Right. And I mean, to be honest with you, I think it would be something that could, to go
Riggs
back
and
to your, well, that's a whole other problem. But going back to your comment, your ACAB, like a little I'm not saying like image rehab, but I'm just saying like maybe some true stories coming out of police departments, not necessarily positive, not necessarily negative, just like, hey, this is how it was. Hey, I was the first black cop on this police force in Alabama, and this is my story. We're also running out of time to get a lot of those stories told. So I was kind of thinking of it. I was like, well, would it be a true crime podcast about murders in southern towns that may or may not be racially motivated? But no, I actually think hearing the stories of like the integration of law enforcement in the South is a much more interesting story. And maybe you call it In the Heat of the Night. Maybe you don't. I don't know. But that's where my mind is.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that's a pretty cool idea. Those stories need to be told, and if they are being told, I'd love to know about it so I could listen to them or check out some stuff about them. If you know of any of that, please email us, ruinedchildhoodspod@gmail.com. You can also check out our website, ruinedchildhoodspod.com. In this episode's description, there'll be links to those, plus our link tree that has our social media stuff. We've got our the Walt that I've got going on, my documentary club.
Yes.
Please sign up. We have our next month coming soon. I'm gearing up for
that.
Check
it out. Yeah.
Check it out. And
John, can I ask, and you feel free to say no, but as I'm asking now as a subscriber, any hints as to what the March selection will be?
Well, I have made a selection, but as part of the deal with premium subscribers who pay $5 a month, they get input on what the coming film is going to be. So I have sent that to those folks, and so I'm waiting to hear any feedback. At a certain point, I just take silence as approval. And so I will be able to announce that soon. Well, let me see. When does this podcast episode come out? We are, let's see, we're in Mississippi. So this will be coming out at the end of the month, probably the 28th. So that information will be coming out very soon. But I will just say that the one that I'm leaning towards is relevant in connection with a major Oscar contender, and has there are certain celebrities that are included that are pretty damn well known. So that's all I'm gonna say for right now, because I don't know if things are gonna change.
Okay, all right, interesting.
Sorry to be dodgy about it, but
no. Intrigue is good. Intrigue is good.
But speaking about March, on March 6th, we'll be releasing our Missouri episode of the podcast. Dan, do you want to tell everybody what we're going to be covering for Missouri?
Yes, we will not be covering a movie about racial problems with the police, although Missouri certainly has known its share of those. No, we will be looking at 2010's Winter's Bone, directed by Deborah Granick, starring Jennifer Lawrence for her first Oscar nomination, John Hawkes, Garrett Dillahunt, and it'll be my first time watching it. John,
same here,
and yours.
Same here.
Yeah.
And John Hawkes, who's in the aforementioned latest season of True Detective, great as always. I'm sure he looks exactly the same in 2010's Winter's Bone. That man just kind of stuck an age, a look for an age, and has just stayed that way for quite a while.
Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. He pulls it off perfectly in Eastbound and Down. John Hawkes is fantastic.
He has a Defoe-ish ability to defy aging and time.
Yeah, he's like, I'm going to be 58 from the year I'm 25 on until I'm probably 88.
Yeah, no, that was Gene Hackman. There we go.
Yeah.
Still is, in fact. I mean, I haven't checked Twitter,
Yeah.
but knock on wood.
Yeah.
Gene Hackman, our thoughts are with you.
Yeah. Well, Dan, as you are trying to safely return to Philadelphia, I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.